What's up, Call of Duty fans? Welcome back. I've got the power rankings ready for you guys, and sorry I've been a little bit MIA again. I'm doing Chinese Contenders broadcasts, so the weekends are pretty packed for me, but it is good because it is the week, and we are having some updates coming to the channel for you. But of course, power rankings. Now, I'm taking in consideration the power rankings just based off the last 2 weeks, not based on any speculation or insinuation as far as who's going to be going or coming when it comes to teams and roster changes. We will save another power rankings for that when we get to just before London, which is still quite a ways away. So for as far as what you can expect from the channel, we'll be doing obviously this. I'm also wanted to be getting a hands-on or eyes-on rather analysis series done for one of the games, probably the Optic and 100 Thieves set maybe. I haven't really decided where I want to go, but I want to do another analysis video, and then beyond that, I'm also going to be doing all the confirmations as far as what happens with RosterMania, and I also kind of want to be doing maybe an interview. I've got a couple players lined up as far as who I might be doing interviews with in the future. So a little bit of hit in there. I don't really upload. I don't really have the chance rather to upload every single day because I do cast a lot. So I apologize for not being as regular on the uploads, but I try to still bring out the best content that I possibly can. So let's just dig into it, huh? Let's go ahead and do the power ranking starting from the bottom. And again, it was not a great week as we typically seem to simulate with the team of evil geniuses. Only 2-13, 16-41 in maps. Yikes. That's not at all the statistic that you want if you're Revan or the Evil Geniuses team. You have to figure there's going to be a change going in the near future. Flat out, I mean, they're just not doing well anywhere is what it comes down to. They're 4-15 in Search and Destroy, 2-13 in the Control. Their best mode is Hardpoint, but even that's not enough to get them through just about anybody, with the exception this time through of Envy of that 3-1 scoreline. They weren't able to beat United. They weren't able to beat Heretics. And then, to be honest, they kind of got smoked by Accelerate. So it was almost a good week for Evil Geniuses. But no, it wasn't actually. Just kidding. It wasn't good at all. Accelerate will be in our 15th spot. Speaking of, again, a number of 2-3 losses and then a couple of 3-0s to finish off their cross-divisional, first stint of their cross-divisional play against two weaker teams. Again, we obviously saw Evil Geniuses in the back end, but UIU did not have a very good week of cross-divisional either. So with that kind of shaky week, I do have them actually moving down one spot, and it's a little bit, you know, I guess touchy because the team that I have moving up is a little controversial as well. That's Midnight I have in the 14th spot. I was actually really impressed with the way that they played throughout the week. Considering that they had an absolutely atrocious Fort Worth, they definitely stepped up and played a little bit better through their cross-divisional. Obviously, getting some wins is big, but being able to beat 100 Thieves and then a pretty convincing 3-1 against Enigma 6 was great. I was surprised by the Denial loss, to be completely honest with you. I did not expect them to lose that game. I had Midnight actually kind of running away with that one, but they did not look good in the Search and Destroy throughout that set. A 1-6 record on the Arsenal, and then an 0-6 score on Payload. My biggest question mark for this team is, can they get consistent in one category or the other? This was a better week for them in the Hardpoint, as they did go 4-4 in Hardpoint in the cross-divisional, but their Search and Destroy was also all over the place. They went 3-3 there, and they actually went 2-2 in the Control. So they just need to get better just overall in everything, because they seem to be a little bit of a one trick when it comes down to what hardpoint they want to play. That's Arsenal, by the way. They've played that now 5 times in the 8 games that they've had a chance to play as a roster, but they have shown improvement. So we'll see if this team can get much better, but I still have them below the 13th spot, which I'm going to keep Denial there, sitting at 5-11. Yes, they had a rough week. They almost pulled out the shocker versus Optic. They had an okay set versus Gen G and Reciprocity, but they did get up that 3-2 win versus Midnight. So just based on the fact that they were able to beat Midnight, I still have them just one step above. But it was a close call. I almost put them down in the 14th spot, but it was hard to justify with Midnight roster being so question mark filled at the moment. In the 12th spot, again, just staying where they are at the moment. Almost put them lower, but it's really hard to kind of determine the 12th through 15th spots because of the records that they have against each other most specifically. But UIU I have sitting here, they are still 6-10. The thing about this team is that I still think they can be really good. They showed that against Heretics, that 3-0, but then they got completely pooped on the rest of the week by everybody. So I'm a little bit lost on what this UIU team actually is, because honestly, they're just all over the place. Their Fort Worth run was not bad by any stretch. They went 3-2, or pardon me, 2-3 at Fort Worth, which was not bad considering they again beat Heretics. They beat Midnight, which is not so bad, but not so great. But they lost a 2-3 to Reciprocity, and they again lost 1-3 to Gen G in that Fort Worth run. So it's kind of hard to get a running tally on what this team actually is. I still think they could be really good. They just need help up in the front SMG SOG line because that's definitely where they're weakest. Speaking of being weak, Enigma 6, 0-4 in their cross-divisional. They're in my 11th spot, 6-11 up there. And again, it's hard to kind of judge like how much lower do you pull this team, because honestly, they played some pretty close games in the beginning of their week. Their 2-3 loss to Optic, their 2-3 loss to Reciprocity, and then the 1-3 to Midnight and the 1-3 to Gen G. It's just hard to get a reading on this team because, again, I think they can be really good, and they play well, obviously, at LAN, at least mostly so, as they were able to go 2-1 in their pool play at Fort Worth before they lost to 100 Thieves twice and Luminosity once. But they were a winner's bracket team. They've been looking pretty solid in the control, too. They're 12-5 there, so it was strange to me that they wouldn't be able to do as much in things like the S&D or the hardpoint, because usually control is the one biggest crutch for most teams, but right now, they're 9-21 in hardpoint, 9-15 in search, and I don't know what it is that this team needs, but you wonder if it's just, again, weaknesses of inconsistencies up front in the SOG line. Diabolic did have a pretty solid game in their last day, but beyond that, it was mostly Chino that popped off this week. So it's interesting to take a look to see what's going to happen with this squad as they go forward. Are there going to be any more changes, or are they just going to keep riding in this level of mediocrity? Speaking of, obviously, we expect big changes from our team that I have in 10th. That's Red Reserve, dropping 4 spots pretty considerably. And again, they did take the 3-2 win and have a couple of close sets with Envy and E United. Most of the control games they did kind of throw away. But again, it's the fact of the matter is they threw those games away. And you cannot lose those games. Those 2-3 losses that they had to both Envy as well as the Heretics is not good. They're a little bit all over the place with their hardpoint and search, not really consistent in any fashion there. And just as you look at their map mode win-loss ratios, 15-12 in hardpoint, okay, pretty darn good. And they actually hold a plus differential in the score for hardpoint, but they're 11-12 in search and they're 10-7 in control. Now, again, they should be doing better in control than they are because they've had, how many? Let's just take a quick count. 1, 2, 3, 4 different losses that of those 7 were at a 2-3 scoreline that honestly they probably should have pulled out, because if my memory serves me right, most of those they were up 2-0 or up 2-1 and just weren't able to close it out. So big question marks for Red. Obviously, we're expecting huge changes for this roster. Those stipulations and speculations we'll keep for another video. Envy in the 9th spot, still sitting at 8-8, and they had a pretty solid week, which is why I have them bumped up a couple of spaces, but not enough for me to put them in the top 8 just because of that 1-3 loss to Evil Geniuses. And honestly, their 3-2 win versus Red was relatively lucky, I would say, more than anything else. And honestly, this team just feels like it comes down to if Huke doesn't perform, this team doesn't perform. They do get the 3-2 win versus Luminosity, which is great, and the 3-0 win versus UIU, which was convincing. But for me, they still need to find a way to improve just generally across the board, because there are a lot of issues still with this team's roster, I think, generally speaking. Again, they're very similar in the same boat as Red, 14-14 in hardpoint, 11-11 in search, and 10-6 in control. So again, very mediocre across the board. They did obviously have a very good pool at Fort Worth, going the 2-3 overall at Fort Worth, but they went 2-1 in the pools, having beat E United and Optic before they lost to Reciprocity. And then they've been just kind of all over the board since then with their losses to the Heretics or loss to Evil Geniuses. It's just hard to get a reading on what this team really is, and that's something that I've said about this squad far too often, to be honest. Let's go ahead and transition and get to the top 8. I do have E United bumped up here. They look better with the addition of Simp in the roster. Just flat out, they look like a much more solid team. They still have some work to do, I think, just to get this roster fully functioning, but they do look better, which is why I have them bumped up. Their wins were not at all convincing by any stretch, with the exception of the one versus UIU, but again, the fact that they were able to take Luminosity to 5 and they're able to sustain themselves through these 5-game sets, which, let's be honest, they are kind of the Game 5 Warriors, as they are 3-2 in a lot of their wins so far. That's a good sign, I think. The fact that they can go the distance and still eke their way into a victory is big. So I'm really excited to see how Simp is able to fill in as a full roster. They looked a lot better in their hard point throughout, but more importantly, they looked better in the search and destroy. They still have some question marks in their control. They are just 6-9 in that department, but they're 13-12 in hardpoint and 13-9 in search. So if they can get a little bit better at the control, this is definitely a major team to be worried about come LAN events, even though they did not do very well at Fort Worth. In the 7th spot, I know Heretics did not play well at LAN, but they have played very well when it comes to the Pro League, they went 3-1 on the week, only losing to UYU, which seems to be their kryptonite. They've lost to UYU more than any other team in the league so far, even going back to Vegas and the Pro League qualifiers just after that. But they're able to find a 3-2 win versus Luminosity, the 3-2 win versus Evil Geniuses, and the big 3-0 versus Red. This team can be so good. I don't know what it is about them being at major events and why they're not able to perform. Maybe it's just the stress, the anxiety, the pressure that's put on by the audience being there. But this team is good. They just need to show up when it comes to major events. And, you know, maybe we'll actually have a good conversation about Heretics finally, because they look good when it comes to the remote studio location land that they have during the Pro League. In the 6th spot, moving up 1 spot, I do have Optic Gaming sitting in here, and I know for a lot of people this is probably going to still feel a little bit low, but again, none of their wins were convincing, and their 0-3 loss to 100 Thieves, even though it wasn't a convincing loss to 100 Thieves, it's still an 0-3 loss to a team that you need to be able to go the distance with. So I'm a little bit worried about Optic. I think they're going to be able to get things together and get ready to go for London. I think they're going to be really kind of getting at the grindstone and not just taking in the kind of complacent, oh, we'll just show up and be fine kind of approach that it's kind of felt like. But this was definitely a fire under their butts, having only gotten the 3 wins at a 3-2 scoreline when they should be beating teams like Enigma 6 and Denial at a higher score. And honestly, they need to be beating Splice at a higher score as well. They almost got reverse swept there. So you have to be able to close out sets if you're Optic Gaming. That's been a conversation for a while with this team, is they always kind of seem to fall out behind and then have to kind of make sure they get their mojo running late. Obviously not the case against Splice, but they still need to be able to close. That's the biggest thing. In the 5th spot, I'm still keeping Reciprocity in my top 5, even though they didn't have the greatest of weeks, having lost to 100 Thieves and Splice. I still think this team is very good, and I think they're going to be able to still put out some awesome performances. It just comes down to this was a strange week for them. Something just kind of felt off in the vibe. I don't know what it was about it. Tommy and Dylan looked great. Weskin still played well. I mean, the whole team plays well. That's the thing. It just comes down to these losses that they have versus Splice. Their search and destroy was all over the place. And I think that's the biggest indicator when it came down to them not being able to close things out. Again, the loss to 100 Thieves as well. I know it reads as an 0-3, but you got to remember that was a 249 to 250 hard point, a 5-6 search, and then there was the 0-3 control. Again, this is one of the worst teams in control. They have gotten better, though, since the addition of Dylan. Before they had Dylan, it was 0 wins. Actually, pardon me, it was 1 win in control since the CWL Pro League regular season started. They've improved that, obviously, considerably since then. So, again, you need to find a way to just make sure you're staying consistent there. They go Game 5 more than just about any other team, as they are 16-21 in hardpoint. That's a lot of maps played in hardpoint. And then they're 19-12 in search. Again, we just need to get that consistency. The thing about this team in hardpoint is they're either losing by 100 points, or they're getting come back when they're up 100 points. So again, they need to be able to close the situations. But again, the potential of them being up there, I think, is really, really strong. In the 4th spot, I have Splice slipping down from where they were previously at number 2, mostly again to the losses to Genji and Optic. They do pull out a 3-1 win versus Reciprocity and the 3-1 win versus Midnight before Midnight had their surge. But again, it just shows me that they're not in the same caliber as the top 3 teams, especially when Genji is in the mix. This is a team that can be good and can be great. We've seen them do it at Fort Worth, but can they get to the top? That's the biggest question mark, and right now my answer would probably be no. Taking a look at number 3, and at 13-4, I have Genji moving up 2 spots. And again, it was kind of a question mark with this team simply because they didn't really have the greatest of schedules when it came down to Fort Worth. I would have loved to have seen them play up against 100 Thieves or Splice at Fort Worth. They don't get that opportunity. They do here in the cross-divisional. They beat Splice pretty considerably at a 3-1 scoreline before they would fall to 100 Thieves, 1-3. And then 100 Thieves game was actually really close with the exception of the control. It was a 192 to 250 loss, a 240 to 250 loss on the hard points. They would win the search 6-5, but then they would lose, like I mentioned, the control 0-3. This is a team that obviously is strong at search, but even more importantly, they're a very good hardpoint team as well. They're 20-13 there. The biggest thing is they need to get consistent in the control because it's a coin flip right now. They are 9-8 at the control. So still holding a positive record everywhere. I just don't have the undeniability to put this team above like a Luminosity, even though they haven't played them yet. And then also, obviously, not having beat 100 Thieves makes them a little bit lower there. So in the number 2 spot, slipping down from the number 1 spot, I have Luminosity still up here in the top 2. The 2-3, this is a tough week for Luminosity. They played all their games to Game 5, losing to Envy and Heretics, but beating Accelerate and E United. So it's kind of like, Well, you lost to 2 OK teams, you beat 2 OK teams. So it's hard to really kind of get a full judgment on this squad. The fact of the matter is we anticipate this team not making any changes and still doing well when it comes to London, especially after their Fort Worth performance. But there definitely were some question marks regarding this team when they were playing up against everybody else because, again, everyone else was also using ramparts now. So is that power spike going to be lessened when it comes to LAN? Are they going to have to adjust more beyond that? Those are all big questions, and we don't really have answers based off these results. So I do have them falling from the #1 spot, but not super drastically. We have seen them play Gen G twice. I guess I misspoke earlier. It was once when they played in the regular season in their division. It was a 3-2 win for Gen G the first time, and then of course at Fort Worth it was a 3-2 win for LG. So kind of splitting the difference. I would love to see that best of 3 finally get finalized by them playing again. And then the #1 spot, only team that's left. I do have 100 Thieves up here. Even though they did lose to Midnight, the fact of the matter is they 3-0'd Reciprocity, they 3-1 Gen G, and they 3-0'd Optic. Even though some of those games were close, the fact of the matter is they beat them flat out. The Midnight game was, I would say, a fluke. I think they just came in just overlooking Midnight completely, and Midnight took advantage of it. And to be honest, that Midnight game is really strange, actually, because if you go back to what that set looked like, everything was played almost on Arsenal. A lot of the games were, and they did not win in Arsenal, which is one of their strongest maps. They lost at Midnight on Arsenal Hardpoint and Arsenal on the Search and Destroy. So very big question marks there. Their search did not look good against Midnight. So, question marks, but I think they were just caught a little bit off guard and were playing just a little bit too overconfident. I still have this team as my #1 squad. So that's going to do it for our power rankings. This was week number 8, I believe it was. I'm not even sure as I'm making this video. Week number 8, yes, so we're going to have our 9th week of power rankings happen just before London. I want to know what you guys have to say, though, so down in the comments below, let me know who your top 5 are and if you think someone was overvalued or undervalued, because I'm interested in getting your conversation started. Hopefully, we'll catch you guys for the next one. I'm not sure what the video is going to be on yet, but I will have another good one out for you guys later this week. So until then, hope you keep holding it down. Later, bye-bye.